When you fall, you have two choices. You can either stay down or get back up. Unfortunately, sometimes you don't always know how to get back up. That's what I'm here for. Take my hand and let's rise together. Welcome to After You've Fallen. What do you think of when you hear the word expectation? Do you get all warm and fuzzy inside because of the satisfaction you feel because you always meet the expectations that others have of you or that you have of yourself? Or do you get a cold chill down your spine accompanied with heat rising up your neck as you remember how discouraged you feel because of your failing to meet those expectations? On the plus side, expectations can give us motivation to set goals and work to attain them. But if those expectations are not in line with your abilities and circumstances, they can damage your self-worth, cause you to feel like a failure, and zap you of strength and motivation. Does any of this sound familiar to you? To complicate matters, when you are dealing with mental health issues or physical limitations, your current abilities may be less than what they were before those challenges came along. And yet, many of us operate with the idea that we should be able to achieve the same level of expectation that we could before. The result is that we are discouraged, often depressed, frustrated that we can't do more, and begin a downward spiral that causes more and more of those negative feelings. So, I don't know about you, but for me, following my traumatic brain injury, I was in total denial that anything had changed. Even though I would stumble and fall going up the stairs, I was convinced I didn't have a problem with balance or spatial orientation. Even though I dealt with severe cognitive fatigue, I was sure that a full load of AP classes at school would be a breeze. Even though my speech had been relegated to a boring monotone, I was sure that I was an entertaining and prolific conversationalist. When people would try and help me see that my perception of myself was not entirely accurate, I would get angry and accuse people of putting me down. But one thing that I would not do was change my expectations. That would be admitting defeat and failure. In fact, it wasn't until recently that I began to realize how demoralizing it can be to hold on to old expectations without making adjustments for changing circumstances or reprioritizing those expectations. Let me give you a couple of examples. Prior to my accident, I was a very determined and goal-oriented person. I would set multiple goals and work to achieve them all. For the most part, I was successful. Very successful. After my TBI, I found that I had difficulties with basic things like brushing my teeth, taking a shower, exercising, having morning and evening prayers, and other things that would fit into a nice daily routine, regardless of having a minute-to-minute schedule at times before my accident. So, in my tenacious way, I have done many different things to try to attain perfection post-TBI. Among many, one method I used was to make charts of the 20, give or take a few, things that I needed to do each day. I had unrealistic, but my only satisfactory expectations of absolute perfection every day. Occasionally, I would actually accomplish all 40,000 things, but most of the time it was too demanding. I got frustrated, I felt like a failure, and I felt downright stupid because these things were easy to do for my pre-accident self. I was never able to relish in the few times I would be able to accomplish all of the tasks, or the times I conquered some of my biggest foes. In fact, trying and failing to achieve perfection daily, I grew to find the term routine or schedule just plain icky. One of my therapists presented the notion that I should take into consideration the circumstances that I might face on a given day and adjust my expectations accordingly. For example, if I wake up energetic and motivated, my exercise plan may be to walk a mile. If another day I'm feeling okay, but not great, my exercise plan would be to walk around the block. But if I have one of those days where motivation is non-existent and energy is just gone, my exercise plan is to purposefully walk from my bedroom to the front door. And regardless of which task I perform, I get credit for exercising on that day because I have taken into consideration the particular circumstances that I am dealing with that day. This is a way to make expectations your friend and to experience the positive attitudes that I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast. Some may say that I am just taking the easy way out. Honestly, there is that risk, and I fight with it constantly from both others and myself. But being honest with yourself regarding your circumstances is vital. The whole thing can be tricky. As I've discussed this concept with my dad, he recalled the quote from Robert Browning that says, a man's reach should exceed his grasp, which tells us that we should always be trying to reach a little higher. But we have to have a firm foundation from which to start. Indeed, we must meet our personal reality with our exceeding hopes and dreams. It is a balancing act between being realistic and overly expecting ourselves to do more. We must learn to gently urge ourselves forward. Unfortunately, if we never take into consideration the changing nature of our abilities and challenges, we vastly lower our potential success rate. I really want to point out one critical thing. I have purposefully avoided the term lowering our expectations. Adjusting our expectations to take into consideration the reality of our situation is not lowering anything. It is adapting to different circumstances and moving forward with an attitude of accomplishment, which is hard. The term that I have found most useful is actually reprioritizing. Because, as you'll see, I have had to reprioritize what I find more valuable in this podcast than releasing once a week. When our abilities change or our situation is different, we must reassess our expectations again and again. Like I just mentioned, one of the areas that I realized that I needed to change and implement these thoughts and principles relates to this podcast. When I started out, I had an intention to release a new podcast every week. Many of the podcasts I listened to were weekly, if not daily, so I thought that was the frequency that I should adopt. And so far, it has worked out okay-ish. But I have struggled managing my resources and stress levels in order to produce the kind of content that I want to bring. My dad helped me realize that the podcasts I was basing my frequency expectation on were posting daily or weekly because that is part of the purpose of their podcast. My purpose has never been to release subpar content more frequently. The purpose of my podcast is to provide resources, options, and support. It does not matter how often they go out. What matters more is the quantity or the quality of the content. So, I am taking my own advice and announcing that I will be adjusting my schedule for releasing new podcasts. My focus is on meaningful, relatable content, which will be released when it is ready, rather than weekly. I have had far too unrealistic expectations for myself. I was putting so much pressure on myself that I have been unable to function properly from the time I released the first podcast, up until I decided to reprioritize my expectations. Since then, I've been able to breathe and focus more on obtaining and combining the sort of content I wish to bring. Unfortunately, this is especially hard because it is extremely difficult to acknowledge and change myself based on my own challenges and limitations. I'm sure you've experienced similar things. Additionally, I want to change the episodes so they are easier for those with head injuries, long COVID, dysautonomia, cognitive fatigue, etc. to listen to. While I do love teaching and talking about things I have learned, I understand from a place of extreme fatigue myself that keeping focus on an hour-long podcast is very rarely possible. So, prepare to have shorter episodes that will likely address one situation from only one angle. I believe that there are so many things that need multiple different dimensions and perspectives. For example, many people believe that drugs are the best way to cure anything, whereas other people believe that drugs are evil and you should focus on nutrition or exercise. Some say that supplements are the way to go, while yet others won't even touch them because it still introduces something foreign to our bodies. I do understand each perspective, but I have found within myself that there is a time and a place for all disciplines. For example, when you have a headache, there are times that just taking a pause on the day, going into a room with far less stimuli, and just relaxing can alleviate the pain. There are other times that you need something as small as Tylenol or Advil. There may be times where you need to avoid certain foods or eat more of something, antioxidants, for example. Yet, there are also even more severe times when you absolutely need an immediate drug like a triptan to release the fiery tension building within your brain and skull. So, because many issues need multiple angles, I may likely release multiple episodes on one issue. Some may be one very close to another, and some may take a while. While so much of me wants to say that you can expect them all at once, I know that that is also an unrealistic expectation. I am trying really hard not to force expectations upon myself that I will likely not be able to meet. That is not easy, but it is something that I have already seen the benefits of in just the last 2 weeks. Next episode, I'll talk about forgiveness towards others and, more importantly, forgiveness for yourself, especially in regards to unrealized expectations. So, while I am not going to be posting as frequently, be sure to hit the notifications button wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to check out my blog, shannonblackham.blogspot.com, for information on brain injuries or my continued progress. Visit the After You've Fallen YouTube page to leave any comments or questions, or email them to afteryou'vefallen@gmail.com. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Again, be sure to hit the notifications icon to know when a new episode comes out. Check out the official Instagram to see when new episodes are coming. You can also find my personal YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, etc., especially to check out some of my amazing music. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.